Let me ask you a question. Do you think all NFL GMs suck at drafting quarterbacks? My guess is your answer is yes. If you're hanging out with your buddies, you're like, these guys don't know what they're doing. I know what I'm doing. I watch SEC football on Saturdays. Well, the math would back you up. Look out, I did some research on this. I went through 20 years of first-round draft picks at the quarterback position. That's 55 quarterbacks drafted in the first round from 1998 to 2017. And based on my metrics, 28 of those 55 were busts. What metrics did I use? My eyes. It was really complicated. Hey, were you good at quarterback? You go on this list. Were you not good at quarterback? Then you go on this list. And we'll share the math a little bit later, but it's pretty clear that there's a more than 50% bust rate at this position.
He's looking like a bust.
So why does this keep happening? Well, I don't know that it's just because the GMs are bad at it. It could very well be that this position is that hard to figure out. Who actually can go from playing on Saturdays to going to playing on Sundays? Hey, this is Ryen Russillo. Today we examine if NFL GMs are idiots. Now, a lot of the arguments about how bad these GMs have been is from Math Guy.
He remembers things, little things sometimes.
Now, Math Guy, let's face it, you're usually pretty arrogant about it. You're almost always condescending and trying to explain how people can't understand all this stuff. But I also kind of understand your own arrogance because imagine dedicating your life to math and having no one understand anything you've done. So what happens is Math Guy's super frustrated because he goes, you know how many wins I have? I'm the guy telling you to stop bunting for 90 years and you finally did it. Okay, that's a win. I was the guy that told you to stop running it up the middle on first and second down and then putting yourself in third and long all the time. You know what? You're right about that. I'm the guy that ruined the NBA. Thanks. With this complicated algebra that so many of us resisted forever, that threes were worth more than twos, as we sat there and said, what about post touches? You were right about that.
First of all, I've always believed analytics was crap.
But it does get back to this just core debate that we always see in sports, the old school scout mentality of wanting a guy to have every box checked, or the analytic guy saying you keep missing out on the wrong quarterbacks all the time. Or, as I'm suggesting, this position is just that much harder to figure out than any other position perhaps in sports. I mean, we get really mad at these GMs. Think how many of you think your GM is the dumbest human being in your city just because they can't figure out this position. And the funny thing is this is just sports. We have really important people messing up far more important stuff than quarterback every single day. Check out your Federal Reserve chairman before the housing crisis.
There's not much indication at this point that subprime mortgage issues have spread into the broader mortgage market, which still seems to be healthy.
I know that Trump guy doesn't get talked about very much, but there were a few people that whiffed on his electability leading up to the year he actually became president of the United States.
Donald Trump is the most unelectable Republican I've seen in my lifetime.
And one of my all-time favorites is that housing was always stable because it was housing.
It's a pretty unlikely possibility. We've never had a decline in house prices on a nationwide basis.
That's it? So why does it keep happening with quarterbacks? I remember all the stats I used to prioritize. I used to think completion percentage meant everything. Now it means nothing with the easy passing games that we have in college. If you look at raw numbers, forget about it. You'd be drafting guys from Washington State first every single year. If you looked at just the prototypical checking off the box, perfect feet, that's one of the dumbest things that ever happens because guess what? Perfect feet almost never are allowed to be set up, especially in those crunch time possessions. A big arm, how many big arm guys have to be drafted before we realize, hey, maybe it's not about just having a big arm?
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
But what I still would get back to is that this sport is just so different. There are more busts at the top or in the first round of an NFL draft than an NBA draft. Just because of Skidishvili and Darko, it doesn't mean that you haven't had guys that were drafted in the top 10 all over the NFL that immediately didn't have a job. There are quarterbacks that I've listed through those 20 years that were out of the league 3 years later, and they were thought to be the best at their position the year they came out of all 130 college football teams.
A kid with his size and his arm strength, something John Elway-like.
That's just crazy math. But maybe that's the point, is we have to keep paying attention to how sporadic the math is in the NFL and realize that there's no way Michael Jordan ever would have gone 199th. That's impossible. But that's essentially what maybe the NFL's greatest player ever did in Tom Brady, lasting until the 199th pick. So the next time you think your GM or all of these GMs are collectively stupid, feel free to submit a way that would make it better. But the reality is, I just think the position's always going to be that tough to evaluate.